I want to be the girl with the most cake. I should probably have a mirror handy so I can check lipstick on my teeth. We're talking about Courtney Love today. Obviously, we have to go through my credentials. You've seen this before. Hole is my number 5 band of the year. That is simply because Live Through This is required listening for me. It's a daily listen. It's my gospel. It's my truth. It is female manipulator music. And that is who I am. That is what I'm inspired by. Here are some disclaimers. These videos are not endorsements because there is a lot to unpack with Miss Love. I regret doing this research. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could suck it out of my brain. I've always known, as a person who grew up in the early 2000s, watching VH1 and MTV, and a lot of reality TV with my mom, I have been aware of Courtney Love's sort of public persona my whole life. Back in the day, I did not know that she was the singer of this really cool band. I am a big Nirvana fan. I think pretty much everybody is. I have a Nirvana smiley tattooed on my butt cheek. I didn't really listen to Hole back then because of internalized misogyny. I believed in the whole Courtney killed Kurt thing, refused to listen to Hole. That's where I'm coming from. I don't have as deep of a history with Courtney Love's music as I did with No Doubt. Nonetheless, here we are. I've done my research. I hated every second of it. If I felt disappointed by Gwen Stefani, then this is a whole new level. I do think that there is some revision work that needs to be done around Courtney Love. She has been treated the way that almost any woman in media in the early 2000s has been treated, which is to say not great. This is a Courtney did not kill Kurt, you weirdos page. This man is enemy number 1 in Courtney's story. Courtney has done a lot to tarnish her own reputation, but nothing has been as prolific as what Tom Grant has done to the public's perception of Courtney Love. He basically gave everybody permission to fucking despise her right off the bat. She comes up with enough reasons for people to dislike her anyway, enough valid reasons, but this man has made it really impossible to have real conversations about Courtney Love's behavior because he fabricated the story that she was involved in this conspiracy to kill Kurt Cobain. We're not going to spend a lot of time debunking this. We're actually not going to spend any time debunking it because I just think it is so untrue that it's not even worth it. If you want to figure this out on your own, I encourage you to do your own research. Just don't use anything that Tom Grant has made as a source. Okay? Because he's a misogynist. We're going to start at the beginning. I don't even know where to start necessarily. So I'm just going to give you the basics and we're going to talk about her music. Courtney was born July 9th of 1964 in Portland, Oregon. She is a Cancer. She lived in San Francisco. She's lived in Seattle. She's basically just a West Coast girly. She claims Portland, Oregon more than she does Seattle, even though she's mostly associated with Seattle because of the grunge movement, because of her famous husband. Another thing about Courtney is that it's really difficult to figure out what is true. If you listen to any of her friends talk about her, basically they will tell you that she is a liar. She loves to lie. She loves to fabricate. She loves to exaggerate. Some people believe that a photograph of her as a child is on the back of a Grateful Dead album. I've heard some people dispute this. Some people say that her dad worked for the Grateful Dead. Other people say that he was just a groupie. I mean, he's just a hippie, you guys. Custody was taken away from her father at the age of 3 because he allegedly gave her LSD. Her mother had full custody of her, has remarried, multiple times. Courtney says that at one point her stepfather, who adopted her, was gay for 7 years of her childhood and then doesn't follow that up with any more information. That's another thing about Courtney is that she will say things that are okay, tell me more. And then she won't. Randomly, her maternal grandmother became very wealthy. Ends up getting a trust fund from her grandmother in her teen years. She gets sent to juvie for stealing a Kiss t-shirt. She also has stolen one of the Runaways albums. She gets kicked out of schools. She gets in fights. She is a rambunctious little girl. Her mother moves to New Zealand while Courtney is still in California. She ends up emancipating herself from her parents. She goes off and travels the world. She lives in Japan. She lives in Dublin. She lives in England. She's stripping. She comes back to the United States with ambitions of becoming an actress. She auditions for the role of Nancy in the movie about Sid and Nancy in 1986. If you don't know Sid and Nancy, Sid Vicious of the band The Sex Pistols and his and his girlfriend, who he allegedly murdered, and then before ending his own life in like a drug craze. Doesn't get the part, but she does get the role of one of their friends. She has like a somewhat successful acting career, which is something that I also didn't realize about her either. This kind of helps her like remain in the public pop culture realm. She says that she had always wanted to be a celebrity. She also says that she gets whatever she wants. Okay, we're good. Courtney is involved in a lot of different bands before she forms Hole. She was the bassist for Babes in Toyland and Minneapolis. She says that she got kicked out. Babes in Toyland says that they didn't kick her out. They were just like at a rehearsal one day and she showed up and they're like, get out of here. And then she did and never came back. So she decides to start her own band. She puts an ad in the newspaper for a guitarist and she finds Eric Erlandson. Courtney is very smart. She's very academic. She went to college, dropped out, but went to college. She's a very talented writer. The name Hole comes from a quote from an ancient Greek tragedy. There is a hole that pierces right through me. She liked that it can be interpreted as like whole, as in like having like a sexual nature. It also comes from something that her mother said to her once. She had this really hard childhood and her mother said, well, you can't just go walking around with a hole in you, Courtney. Triple entendre has all these different meanings. That's where it comes from. Hole releases their first studio album, Pretty on the Inside. It releases in September of 1991. Nevermind, the very famous Nirvana album that kind of like launched them into huge stardom, comes out about a couple of weeks after Pretty on the Inside comes out. It was produced by Kim Gordon from the band Sonic Youth. She wrote Kim Gordon like a personal letter asking her to produce the album, and Kim Gordon said yes. That was nice of her. Because of the album's themes, a lot of people have associated it with the Riot Grrrl feminist punk movement of the 90s. In the 90s, it was very controversial to identify yourself as a feminist, and Courtney Love like consistently rejected the title of feminist, which is frustrating to see. Probably Courtney's refusal to call herself a feminist was a strategic choice because she knew that she was going to be in this male-dominated industry. She was really focused on being successful and she was very ambitious and she kind of knew how to play the game. She also has some opinions that are not super aligned with intersectional feminism at the very least. In 2011, Courtney calls this album unlistenable. Important to say too that this is their most punk, most heavy album. They go on tour with the Smashing Pumpkins. Courtney meets Billy Corgan. She's walking down the streets of Chicago, finds Kurt, who she had met before, always had a crush on, and they hook up and they start dating. We've got Kurt and Courtney getting married in Hawaii on the 24th of February in 1992. Frances Bean Cobain is born August 18th of 1992 and becomes the coolest baby of the 90s. Here she is pictured with RuPaul and Kurt. Frances did post this on her Instagram at one point, and it's just the most hilarious photo ever. Vanity Fair does an interview with Courtney Love in 1992, right before Frances is born. They published this story basically saying that Courtney Love is a junkie, that she was using heroin all throughout her pregnancy. This really, really bothers Kurt. Despite their hobby of recreational heavy drug use, really just want like a normal domestic life. She was using drugs early on in the pregnancy before she knew, but she does say that she went to a bunch of different doctors when she found out that she was pregnant, feeling concerned about the drug use, and they all said that it was fine as long as she stopped. And she did. They had cited a bunch of like anonymous sources who said otherwise. This magazine is used as proof from the Department of Children and Families to come and take Frances Bean away right when she's born. So, Live Through This is released April 12th of 1994. One of the best albums of all time. We've got songs about Kurt Cobain on here, doll parts, feeling really insecure about how she, had a crush on him and he was really wanted by a lot of different people. Super relatable. We've got Plump about there was this perception of her being a terrible mother, so she wrote this song basically saying, all right, you think I'm a bad mom, then here you go. Here's exactly what you think that I am. And she writes the song I Think I Would Die about Frances being taken away with the lyrics, I want my baby. Where is my baby? Kurt's body is found a week before this album is released. Courtney is not doing great, and she does not seek the proper treatment for bereavement, for grieving. She does take a small break, but 2 months after Kurt dies, Hole's bassist, Kristen Paff, also dies of an overdose. A lot of the problematic behaviors that people criticize her for come from this tour promoting Live Through This. She is behaving really badly. If you know anything about grieving, or if you've ever been around a person that is grieving, they suck. They suck to be around. And I can say that because I am a person who has lost somebody very close in my life. I definitely wasn't saying racist things because my mom died. I think that's a stupid thing to say. Kurt dying had anything to do with her, like, making really racist statements on stage, or, you know, making the audience say the N-word with her. It's not an excuse. I think it's obviously your responsibility to get the help that you need so that you don't harm the people around you, and Courtney doesn't do that, and that is disappointing. But at the end of the day, God, what a horrible thing to go through. And I don't think any of us know what that's like. So before we get into the third Hole album, I do want to talk about some of her her battles. There are so many to choose from, but I'm going to go through some of my favorites, and I'm also going to tell you who I think won. Courtney versus Kathleen Hanna. So, for those of you who don't know who Kathleen Hanna is, she is one of the founding members of the band Bikini Kill, is one of the bands that started the Riot Girl feminist punk movement of the 90s. Let's talk about this feud. We're at Lollapalooza 1995. It's hard to nail down exactly what happened. There are a bunch of different accounts. Most of the people who have talked about what occurred this day are members of the band Hole, so there might be some bias there. According to Kathleen, she was just standing there backstage and was assaulted by Courtney. That's what she said in her documentary, The Punk Singer, that was released in 2013. According to Courtney, Kathleen is the one who started it. She made a comment about Frances Bean under her breath, saying, like, where's your baby? Kind of like alluding to Courtney being a bad mother. I don't know if that's true. Courtney's the only one who has said that that is what Kathleen said to her. Eric says something along the lines of, oh, look, the lead singer of Bikini Kill. Why don't you give her some candy, Courtney? And then Courtney throws candy at her, because that is just the kind of person that Courtney is, okay? She just likes to start trouble. So Kathleen kind of responds in an annoyed way, like most people would. It's unclear exactly what she said, but Courtney and another one of the members of Hole has said that Kathleen, like, challenges Courtney to a feminist debate at any university in America. So they kind of like laugh at her. I guess Courtney punches her in the face. That definitely did happen. Who wins this? I'm gonna go ahead and give it to Kathleen because assault bad. Assault bad. I'm not afraid to say that. I don't know if that's a controversial take. I don't think you should punch people, no matter how dorky they are. Now we've got Courtney versus Billy Corgan. Billy Corgan is the lead singer of Smashing Pumpkins. You guys, I had to watch the Joe Rogan podcast for this. So please drop a like or something. Make this worth it for me. You made me do that. You made me do that. On the Joe Rogan podcast, many years after this occurred, Billy talks about how he and Courtney dated. He says that they were hooking up, that they were having sex. Then Billy has a new girlfriend. He's living in Chicago. Courtney calls him up and is like, can I come over? And he's like, yeah, I guess. And she's like, good, I'm at the airport. I'm on my way. She shows up at his apartment and the girl's there, and Courtney freaks out like she likes to do. And she leaves, and this is where she meets up with Kurt, and you know, the rest is sort of history. There's this iconic performance where before Courtney plays the song Violent, she says,
a song about a jerk. I hexed him. Now he's losing his hair.
Courtney wins. Kat Bjelland is the lead singer of Babes in Toyland. You might be thinking, these two women look the same. You might be thinking that maybe I kind of look like them a little bit. I don't know. Some people say that. Some people say that. Some people say that like I look really cool. And I look like and I look like a rock star. That's just what people have been saying. I've got what is said to be the actual lipstick that Courtney was using back in the day. This is MAC in the shade Diva. Somebody on TikTok said that this is the shade that Courtney used, but who knows if that's correct. I think it looks similar. I think we look the same. We're running out of daylight, by the way. If you see that happening, guys, ignore it. Courtney was in Babes in Toyland for a brief amount of time. She becomes really successful in her own band. Babes in Toyland has a pretty successful career as well, but they don't reach the same level of success as Whole. I think that that might be part of the reason why Kat Bjelland felt this way, feeling like her look and her vibe, her whole persona was essentially stolen by Courtney. It's a style that was nicknamed Kinderwhore. Courtney has like addressed this. She doesn't seem to be very bothered by the fact that she was accused of stealing Kat's look. Courtney also says in an interview in 1998 that one of the members of Babes in Toyland is a waitress now. Basically what Courtney was saying, Babes in Toyland were one of their peers in the beginning, and because they didn't adapt, because they didn't like kind of grow out of their punk rock persona, aesthetic, whatever, that they had no lasting power. And that's why Hole was still out and about making successful albums. Kat Bjelland accused Courtney of never really being punk, that she didn't really like punk. When Courtney put her ad out in the paper, she said that one of her inspirations was Fleetwood Mac. So I don't think that that is a hugely outrageous accusation to make. She basically calls Courtney a poser, and Courtney calls herself a poser. In 1998, she says that she never really felt like a punk. Kat writes the song Bruise Violet about Courtney. Courtney writes the song She Walks on Me about Kat. It is the most punk sounding song on the album Live Through This. So this is like a tough call. I do think that it's lame to accuse somebody of stealing your style, but I also understand how frustrating it would be to see somebody like take your look and then become more famous than you. I think I'm gonna have to go ahead and make this battle purely on the two songs. And despite Live Through This being, again, my favorite album, I think Bruise Violet might be a better song than She Walks on Me, just by a little bit. I am going to give this to Kat. So, great job, Kat. I hope that you're doing well now. We've got Courtney versus Barbara Walters. Now, this woman is a villain. I hate how interviewers do this. They'll ask an extremely inappropriate question and then just be like, well, this is what people want to know. It's like, that doesn't like give you a pass to be disrespectful. Courtney and Barbara do this interview in 1995. She just says things that are like secretly funny and also are hinting at like having more history, more interesting things behind them. And if you were a good interviewer, you would pick up on that and ask her more. But Barbara is just an agent of chaos and only wants to embarrass Courtney, I guess. She asks her, are you on any drugs right now? Are you doing heroin? Are you on Prozac? As if Prozac is on the same level as heroin. Courtney says the Prozac didn't work, which is an interesting comment. I want to know more. What do you mean? We don't get a follow-up on that because Barbara's not good at her job. Barbara asks Courtney about her simulating Kurt's death on stage. She says that some people would find this as in terrible taste. I hate when other people tell you how you're supposed to grieve when they didn't even know the person that you're grieving. Courtney responds by asking her,
do I ignore it? Do I acknowledge it? Is there a middle ground? What can I do? Do I sit here and, play Betty Crocker and pretend that I don't write music?
Barbara asks her, is this your way of paying tribute? And she says,
it's more catharsis. It's catharsis. It was for me, not for them. And yet they get something out of it.
I think that says it all. She's expressing what she's going through in her art. And I think it makes people uncomfortable. And if it does, don't go to the show. Don't go see Hole then. So yeah, Courtney wins this round. She also Courtney says that she demanded that she do her own hair and makeup. I think it looks good. All right, so we're going to get into her third studio album, Celebrity Skin. It's more poppy. The songs Malibu and Celebrity Skin are really great songs, but otherwise doesn't really hit the same. It's definitely not as successful as Live Through This, but it is still a success. It comes out in 1998. Unironically, not just because of the name of the album, this is like where Courtney actually enters into her like celebrity era. The early 2000s is like the beginning of like the famous for being famous movement. Courtney kind of hops on that same train of like just like being like a public persona. I mean, she's on red carpets. She's friends with a lot of famous people. She's friends with Winona Ryder. She's seen with like Pamela Anderson and Avril Lavigne, which is one of my favorite photos of all time. She releases a solo album called America's Sweetheart in 2004. She reflects on this album as a huge failure. She was doing a lot of cocaine, and one of the producers that she was working on the album with was her boyfriend at the time, and she said that he was a thief and doing a lot of drugs with her, and was one of the reasons why it was such a huge failure. When she's promoting the album, she goes on a lot of talk shows and she acts extremely erratically. She flashes her tits on Letterman. She was featured on the roast of Pamela Anderson, clearly messed up out of her mind. It really worries me that there's nobody in her life at this time who is like getting her off stage. I think people are sort of treating Courtney as like, oh, this is going to be a train wreck and it's going to give us a lot of views. Courtney assaults somebody at a club. According to her, it was an accident. She gets arrested, ends up overdosing on heroin, which she says that she hadn't used for 10 years at that point. She is sent to rehab against her will, and she gets sober. While she was in rehab, she writes a bunch of songs and she starts working on a new album. Originally, it was going to be another solo album. She then decides to call it a Hole album. Eric is annoyed at her for using the name Hole, as he allegedly owned half of the rights to Hole. Either way, she releases it April 23rd in 2010. Billy Corgan is one of the producers on it. A lot of people say that Kurt Cobain wrote a lot of the original Hole songs, and it's just, again, another like misogynistic lie that people tell because I feel like they believe that women, for whatever reason, can't be successful on their own. She would be extremely proud if Kurt had written any of the Hole songs, and she would be honest about that. And she says, you know, look, Billy helps me write these songs, and I'm being honest about that, so I don't understand why people don't believe me when I say that Kurt did not write any of those other songs. So Nobody's Daughter does not really perform well. It actually like performs not even as well as America's Sweetheart, which was her like bad solo album. She is proud of Nobody's Daughter. Is this interview that she does on the record with Feuds. It's iconic. She is very clearly just not into it. She's there to promote her album. He asks about like if she killed Kurt.
I want to give you a chance to talk to people who say you had some part in this. What do you say
I had
to that?
no part in it, and that's a ridiculous question.
She's like, you have to show this clip of Kurt saying that I'm the best fuck ever.
Okay.
That Courtney Love, the lead singer of the sensational pop group Hole, is the best in the world.
She ends the interview by just saying like, I have to deal with a personal issue and you're like gonna have to deal with that. So last question. Her now. So she is pretty much the same. She lives in England. She's coming out with a book and a record soon. She loves Lana Del Rey. And I love this friendship for her. I think it makes total sense. She, in a recent interview, said that Lana Del Rey and Kurt Cobain are the only musicians that are musical geniuses. Her daughter, Frances Bean, is now married to Tony Hawk's son, Riley Hawk. She does accuse Olivia Rodrigo of stealing her album artwork, which, like, fine, I guess. She hates social media, so she pretty much stays offline now. So does Frances Bean. I think we could all do a little bit of that. I was really trying to figure out, like, who even is Courtney? Like, what does she believe? What are her values? She at one point on the Live Through This tour pulled up a black person on stage and asked them if they really listened to rock music, as if Black people didn't invent rock music. But she also, in an interview in 1998, says, I think punk rock in America is a Marxist male rite of passage. I don't think that it has anything to do with outsider women. Just like Black people, like any minority in any form, we all need as big of a voice as we can possibly get. I think she also understands that bad publicity is good publicity. And there's also a little bit of like genuine public unraveling mixed in there as well. And I think, you know, the media just grabbed onto that in a way that is unethical. In terms of like her feminism, Courtney is obsessed with looks. She talks about her weight all the time. She puts other women down. She called Kathleen Hanna rat face. She just reeks of insecurity. We didn't ask to grow up in a patriarchy. We didn't ask to be groomed to care about the way that we look. Is it her fault that she's this insecure? I don't know. At the same time, she also really stands up for herself. She calls out sexism. You know, when people were saying that Kurt had written all of the Whole songs, she got her record deal. They gave her an offer and she looked up how much Kurt was making from his record deal. And she was like, well, you guys want to say that Kurt wrote my music, you better be paying me Kurt money. We're coming to conclusions. Do I like Courtney Love as a person? No. I think she's a genius. And it pisses me off. Is she iconic? Yep. I mean, she's one of those women who the public treated as if she couldn't be self-aware. People thought that she wasn't smart. She's actually incredibly smart and incredibly problematic. Finally, is she a feminist? I don't think that you can be a feminist and say the things that she said. She's just her. So sorry that it is dark now. Should have started this a little bit earlier. I didn't realize how long it was going to take me. Video is sponsored by Burly Girlies. Go listen. Thanks for being here. I'm getting hungry. So I'm going to go. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover, so we have some more ideas for the future. See ya. Thanks for being here. Bye.